just 3 weeks away. We must not, however, lose sight of the fact that a scheme of this sort opens the door to a major change in the relationship between the citizen and the state. Never before in peacetime has government in this country controlled in this way where we can go, with whom, and what to do. And if the government has concluded that this now has to change, then at the very least, this House must have a chance to make its voice heard and its views known. So when will we get the vote that the Minister promised us before the recess? The case for vaccine passports is riddled with inconsistencies. Nightclubs have been open now since July, and notwithstanding recent events in Aberdeen, they have been relatively safe. If they are safe today for people to enjoy responsibly, then what does the government expect to change between now and the end of the month? On Monday, the Minister told me at the dispatch box, we do know that 60% of people who have had 2 jabs will not become infected with the Delta variant and therefore cannot infect someone else, although 40% can and will. The 40% figure highlights one of the biggest dangers of the whole idea, taking people into large social gatherings where they think they will be safe from infection, but in fact they are not. The Minister will know that there will always be some who cannot be vaccinated. So if entry to nightclubs or events is to be dependent on demonstrating vaccination, they will be excluded. So can the Minister tell the House what assessment has the government made with regard to their duties under equalities legislation? A study by the Nighttime Industries Association found that 69% of their members view the introduction of vaccine passports as having a negative impact on business. 70% said they were not necessary for opening their business. Why is the government not listening to the experts in the industry? When will the nightclubs and other businesses be told how they will be expected to check the vaccine status of their patrons? What legal authority will they have to do this, and what will be the consequences for them if they do not? On the 12th of July, the Secretary of State for Health told the House, as we move away from regulations, there will no longer be a legal requirement for any establishment to have COVID vaccine certification. When did that change and why?
Minister. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm grateful for the right honourable gentleman's questions. Let me attempt to address them. But I will begin by just saying to the House that no one in this government, certainly not this Prime Minister, it is not his DNA to curtail people's freedoms or require people to show a piece of paper before they enter a nightclub. The reason that we are moving forward on this is because if you look at what has happened in other countries where nightclubs were opening and then shutting again, opening and shutting again, is that we want to avoid that disruption and maintain sectors that can add to people's enjoyment of life and dance, as it did for the Chancellor of Duchy of Lancaster, that they can do so sustainably. The reason for the end of September, it's one of his questions, is because by the end of September, all 18-year-olds and above would have had the chance to have 2 doses. And it is quite right when he quotes what I said to him at the dispatch box a few days ago, that for 60% of people who are double vaccinated, they will not be infected and therefore will not spread the infection, but 40% may do. And it is the view of our clinical experts that sort of the additional relative safety of having to be double vaccinated before you can enter a nightclub does begin to mitigate against super spreader events, which could cause us to then effectively take a decision to close nightclubs, which we would not want to do. He asked about the disruption to business. Well, as he will know, this is a tried and tested solution that has been extensively used throughout the government's events research programme. It requires venues to check or scan the NHS COVID pass in the same way nightclub bouncers check ID before entry. He then asked about the equalities impact assessment, and I can assure him that we conducted a full equalities impact assessment and consulted widely to understand the potential equalities impact of COVID status certification. Speaking to ethicists and representatives of disabilities, race and faith groups, the system allows both digital and non-digital proofs to help ensure access for all. So constituents who don't have a smartphone, for example, can confirm their vaccine status by calling 119 and getting that by email or via written letter. It is not something, as I say, we do lightly. It is something to allow us to transition this virus from pandemic to endemic status. We are coming towards the winter months, and there will be upward pressure in terms of infections because of the return to school, because of winter, and of course large gatherings of people in especially indoor venues like nightclubs could add to that. The mitigation against that to allow us to transition this virus from pandemic status to endemic would be the booster program, which we will, I hope, be embarking upon later this month after the final recommendations from the JCVI.
We now come to William.
What a load of rubbish. I don't believe my honourable friend believes a word which he just uttered, because I remember him very persuasively stating my position, which we shared at the time, that this measure would be discriminatory, and yet he's sent to the dispatch box to defend the indefensible. This is a needless fight that we seem prepared to have in this House over this issue, completely unnecessary. We all agree that people should be encouraged to take the vaccine, and I again encourage everybody to do so. But to go down this route, which is overtly discriminatory, will be utterly damaging to the fabric of society.
I'm grateful for my honourable friend, and he has made his view to me very clear on many occasions, and it pains me to have to take a step like this, because we do not take it lightly. But the flip side of that is that if we don't, and the virus does cause super spreader events in nightclubs, and I have to stand at the dispatch box and announce to the House that we'd have to close that sector, that would be much more painful to me.
Shadow Secretary Angela.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the Honourable Member for Orkney and Shetland for bringing this important topic to the House. I want to also associate myself with the Minister's opening remarks today regarding vaccine uptake. I think it's incredibly important that people do take up that vaccine where possible, and I reiterate that from this dispatch box from the opposition as well. We're weeks away from implementation, Mr. Speaker, but whilst ministers were relaxing over summer, there was no clarity from government about these plans, and businesses remain anxious. Our priorities are clear: protect the NHS and our economy, and we absolutely cannot be faced with an unmanageable winter crisis for both. So my first question to the Minister is really simple. What does the Minister think this will achieve? How and when will the UK government decide which businesses must implement vaccine certification? And will they rely on low-paid staff at venues to act as public health officials? And what support will they be getting? The NHS COVID Pass application currently allows for individuals in England to either input a negative test result or complete a vaccine record. This is important for those that cannot, for legitimate medical reasons, take the vaccine. Can the Minister explain why the government plans to drop the negative test option? Will they improve and keep available the NHS COVID Pass application, or will it be replaced or outsourced? And let me be crystal clear, Mr. Speaker, we cannot support any potential COVID Pass scheme for access to everyday services. So can the Minister categorically assure me that no one will be required to have a COVID vaccination pass to access essential services? Mr. Speaker, this government has diddle-dawdled and, as some said, dad-danced away the summer. They have not planned or prepared, and they have not provided the reassurances or presented a clear path forward. UK business has had a hell of an 18 months during this difficult pandemic. They need a proactive, supportive government. And it's about time, Mr. Speaker, that ministers opposite work towards this aim.
Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm grateful for the honourable lady's opening words and her urging those who have not had a vaccine to come forward and be protected. She asked a number of important questions relating to this, including what this will achieve. Well, she will know that the ability for people to travel whilst being double vaccinated was something that was important, and the implementation of that was successful, largely successful. We need to go further to make sure that we recognise other vaccines from other countries around the world that will be recognised by the WHO and our regulator and other regulators to make it even easier for people who are double vaccinated to travel to the United Kingdom. The NHS stands ready to continue both NHS England, Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland, that joint work, as well as, of course, NHS X in terms of the technology. She asked about people's access to essential settings, incredibly important. I can assure her that there are some essential settings which will not need to for people to show COVID vaccine certification. These settings that have stayed open throughout the pandemic, such obviously public sector buildings, essential retail, essential services, and of course public transport. She asks also about what this will achieve domestically. Well, I think, I hope, combined with the vaccination program, the booster program, and all the work we've done around education, we'll be able to transition this virus post the winter from pandemic to endemic status. And the reason for this very difficult decision is to allow us to sustain the opening of the economy, including the nightclub sector, without having to flip-flop and go back and close down sectors because of super spreader events. When you talk to whether it be the Chief Medical Officer, Chris Whitty, will tell you that is, of course, in absolute terms, because of what I discussed earlier, if you're double jabbed, only 60% will not be infected and therefore not spread, but 40% could. But in relative terms, putting that downward pressure on the infection rates is important in that journey towards that transition from endemic to from pandemic to endemic.
So I agree with what the chairman of the Select Committee said. The minister set out earlier this year that this was discriminatory. He was right then, and he remains so. It is a discriminatory policy. The vaccines are fantastically effective at reducing hospitalisation and death. They're very much less effective against the Delta variant at reducing transmission. This is a pointless policy with damaging effects. And I'm afraid the minister is picking an unnecessary fight with his own colleagues. And I say to him, the government should think again. The leader of the House has been clear. We do not believe in this House, the government does not believe this policy is necessary for us to meet here in a crowded place. Let's not have one rule for members of parliament and another rule for everybody else. Drop this policy.
Minister.
I'm grateful for my right honourable friend's question. He asked about my previous position, which again I addressed a few days ago from the dispatch box back in January and then February. We didn't have the level of evidence of the Delta variant, which he spoke about, which is far more infectious, only requires a few particles of Delta to be infectious. The data I gave earlier, I cited earlier, that 60% of people who are double vaccinated will not be infected by Delta and therefore will not spread it, but 40% could do. In terms of being discriminatory, there will be, of course, exemptions. So in exceptional circumstances for individuals where a clinician recommends vaccine deferral or that vaccine is not appropriate and where testing is also not recommended or on clinical grounds. And of course, those who have received a trial vaccine, including those who are blinded or may have a placebo as part of the formally approved COVID vaccine trials in the United Kingdom. But I think, look, this is not something that we enter lightly, but it is something that is part of our armoury to transition over the winter months this virus from pandemic to, I hope, endemic status, will be able to stand in this dispatch box very soon after that, and be able to share with the House that we don't need to do this anymore as we deal with the virus annually through an annual vaccination programme.
SNP spokesperson Stuart Hulsey.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I first pay tribute to all of those involved in the vaccination programme? It has been extraordinary. I mean, in Scotland, we've got 4.1 million adults with the first dose, almost 4 million with the second dose, north of 90% of all adults with at least one dose. And it's across the UK. It's a fantastic result since last December. But the pandemic isn't over. Lives are still at risk, and the pressure on the NHS are very real. So we in Scotland are introducing a vaccine passport, but broadly it will be limited to nightclubs, outdoor standing events with more than 4,000 people, and any event with more than 10,000 people. While the rules in England may be slightly different, I hope it is as proportionate as that. But can I ask the Minister, and can I go back to the issue about essential services? It's not enough simply to say you won't need a vaccine passport to get an essential service. It's got to be any setting where your attendance is unavoidable. Shops, public transport, medical services, education. We need the confirmation that no setting where your attendance is unavoidable, you will require to have a vaccine passport.
Minister.
I'm grateful for the honourable member's excellent citation of the vaccine success in Scotland. NHS Scotland has done a tremendous job, as has the NHS in Wales and Northern Ireland, and of course in England. And I think he raises a really important point around essential services, and of course in the process of parliamentary engagement and scrutiny, we'll be able to share the detail of that in due course.
Karen Bradley.
Very much, Mr. Speaker, and can I pay tribute to my honourable friend who is defending a policy that I don't think his heart is truly in. But can I ask him a technical question? If a fake vaccine passport is used, who bears responsibility? Will it be the venue? Will it be the person who checked it? Or will it be the individual who've used the fake passport? And who will police it? Well, we're asking our local police, our local authority, or some other agency.
Minister.
I'm grateful for my right honourable friend's question, and she asks an important question. And when I or a minister from the Cabinet Office stands at the dispatch box and shares the detail of the implementation, we will address that issue in full.
Sue Waldholtram.
The Nighttime Industries Association and others have expressed concerns around the practical implementation of this policy as well. And as the Minister has highlighted, those questions still remain and need to be answered quickly. And will the Minister also publish clear guidance on which events and venues are going to require a COVID passport? There will also be increased costs for businesses at a time when they're recovering. So will they also be getting extra funding, and when will that be announced?
Minister.
I'm grateful for the honourable lady. We will absolutely issue clear guidance as to which venues we spoke about nightclubs, because they're of particular concern when it comes to evidence from other countries of super spreader events, but we will absolutely do that.
Sir Desmond Swain.
Isn't the super spreader event the spread of illiberal, discriminatory and coercive policies from this dispatch box?
It pains me to have to stand at this dispatch box and have to implement something that goes against the DNA of this minister and his prime minister. But we are living through difficult times, unprecedented times, as one of the major economies of the world. I think we've done an incredible job as the four nations for implementing the vaccination program, and this is a precautionary measure to ensure that we can sustainably maintain the opening of all sectors of the economy.
Nera Wilson.
Very much, Mr. Speaker. I almost feel sorry for the Minister because he really is struggling to defend this policy. But he has failed to answer my right honourable friend's fundamental question about this deeply illiberal, discriminatory and unnecessary policy. Will this House get a vote on the implementation of COVID vaccine passports? Yes
or no?
Minister.
The Honourable Lady's question, there will be appropriate parliamentary scrutiny. I have said that today, and I have said that in the past as well.
Thank you, Speaker. I do fear that my honourable friend is on a sticky wicket, and I would point out to him that if people have had COVID and then haven't had any vaccinations, they will not get a passport that he's proposing, and therefore they will not be allowed into nightclubs. We are a proud Liberal party in the fact that we believe in freedoms and whatever happened to a laissez-faire attitude. Nightclubs have been open since July. You haven't closed them yet. There is no need for a vaccine passport.
Minister.
I'm grateful for my honourable friend's question, an important question. And he's quite right. They have been open. The end of September date was chosen deliberately because it would allow over 18-year-olds to have the opportunity to be double vaccinated. I would just say to him that on people who may have had COVID and not had the vaccine, there is evidence around, for example, the beta variant that actually could be much more harmful to people unless they get vaccinated. So I would urge people who have had COVID and recovered to get the vaccine and get double jabbed and get protected.
Let's hear from the former voice of the north of the DJs, Jeff Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, as somebody who worked in nightclubs for 25 plus years, let me tell the Minister, this is a recipe for chaos on the doors at nightclubs. I mean, and as my friend said, the Nighttime Industry Association, as I said to him the other day, has said this will cripple the industry. This is an industry that's been massively hard hit, that relies on walk-up trade. It's going to be impossible for them to run. Let me ask him two questions. Firstly, how does he define a nightclub as opposed to a bar with a DJ playing, a late bar with a DJ playing music? That's the first question. Secondly, there's no rationale for this. What, as the Honourable Mayor there said, nightclubs have been open for weeks. Why close them now? And why close nightclubs? Or why would it require vaccine passports for nightclubs as opposed to other crowded indoor venues? Let's say the chamber and the voting lobbies of the House of Commons.
Minister.
I'm grateful for my honourable friend's important question, and I have to say to him, as I said earlier, part of the trials allowed us the confidence that we think we can do this and do it well. It's something that has already been implemented for international travel. Other countries in Europe have this for nightclubs as well. So it is something that we think is the right thing to do to help us transition this virus from pandemic to endemic status. So we'll be coming forward with the details for parliamentary scrutiny in due course.
The voice of Pirate Radio, Vital Fabricant.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Although I understand the libertarian argument regarding this and the very good points put forward by my honourable friend, for Orkney and Shetland, is it not the prime duty of any government to protect its own population, whether in peace or war? And in many ways, are we not in a unique war with this virus? And could I say to my honourable friend that, you know, the passport is available easily. I've got it on my own iPhone now, though it shows my date of birth, which I'd rather it didn't do. And I certainly... And I certainly agree, by the way, that if we want to have equality, we should be actually using the passport to get access to this chamber. Because this chamber is also a crowded place. But won't the passport also encourage more people to get double vaccinated?
I'm grateful for my honourable friend's question. I think I would agree with him that it is a very strong libertarian argument and not one that I would disagree with. This is a difficult decision, an important decision. As he says, we still are not in a place where I can stand here and say, hand on heart, we have transitioned this virus and it is no longer a pandemic, which is why we're having to take that decision. Where I would slightly disagree with is obviously public buildings should remain accessible and open to all without this, because there are sort of relative measures that you can take to allow us additional protection as we head towards the booster program.
Chris Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This is me looking sheepish earlier. Apologies. Just to say, look, this is just nonsense. I'm 100% in favour of vaccination. I'm 100% opposed to vaccine passports. There's no legal definition of what a nightclub is as opposed to a place where other people might be bouncing up and down, shouting at one another across a chamber in a room with 500 people. There's no legal definition that he's going to be able to rely on, and you're going to be, and the government will be turning bouncers on the door into effective legal officers, and they're going to be deciding on whether somebody's had a placebo or not. I mean, this is for the birds. We can relieve him of all his pain. Just say he's thought again and he's not going to do it.
Minister. I'm grateful for the honourable member's question. I would just say to him, the bouncer will not have to decide if someone had a placebo or not, because anyone who's been on a trial will be deemed to be vaccinated. They will receive their certificate. I've said this at the dispatch box before recess. I explained and actually the Secretary of State took to the WHO a plea for the rest of the world so that we continue to encourage people to come forward for trials, for vaccine trials, that they should be considered to be fully vaccinated, whether they've had the placebo or otherwise. And I repeated it today. So that will not be an issue for bouncers at nightclubs.
Richard Fuller.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The measures as presented by the minister today are unsupportable. They're unsupportable because they're bereft of any rationale. Yeah. And I would ask the minister to think very carefully about whether this government wishes to take powers which were deemed to be emergency powers and make them normal powers of a government in a free society. I, for one, think that's extremely unwise, and there's no place for them.
Minister. I'm grateful for my honourable friend's question. Where I would agree with him is that these are not normal times that we are enduring. This is a measure that we are having to take, and if he hears from our chief medical officers in England, in Scotland now, and of course Wales and Northern Ireland, this is a mitigation to allow us to continue to transition this pandemic over the winter months and not have to reverse that policy. And I say to him with a heavy heart, I would much rather stand here and take the arrows from colleagues in the back or the front, rather than come back here to this house and have to close down nightclubs because the virus has caused a super spreader event and have to explain that to the whole industry, because I think that is much more detrimental to businesses if you're having to open and shut them again.
Emma Hart.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I don't think the Minister can underestimate how freedom has been limited by those with medical exemptions. I've heard from my own constituents that they feared even leaving the House. Now, the idea that they will see those freedoms limited again is abhorrent. So how can the Minister ensure that the medically exempt will not have further restrictions on their freedoms because of his vaccine passport plan?
Minister.
I'm grateful for the honourable lady's question, and we spend a lot of time, energy and resource on making sure that those with medical exemptions and of course underlying medical conditions, as you'll recall, were prioritised in both category 4 and 6 of the vaccination programme for phase 1. The JCVI have gone further with the immunosuppressed, but we, as I said in my earlier remarks, there will be exemptions for those who, for whatever reason, cannot be vaccinated or cannot have a test for medical conditions from this particular set of rules.
Great.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Would my honourable friend confirm that the duration of these passports, whether they're passed by the government or whether it's done by a vote, only lasts so long as it's considered that the United Kingdom is in a pandemic state, not an endemic state in terms of the disease? And would he also set out when that transition actually happens so we can judge and understand for ourselves?
I'm grateful for my honourable friend. Very thoughtful question. The great difficulty with actually knowing at what stage do we feel confident that the virus has transitioned from pandemic to endemic. We have entered a period of equilibrium now with the virus because of the success of the vaccination program, the upward pressure on infections. It's obviously schools going back. The downward pressure on infections will be the booster program and mitigating policies like the one we are debating today. But this government certainly does not see this as a sort of long-term power grab to restrict people's liberties.
Lawrence Eshelman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I feel I should try and help the Minister by thanking him for the regular briefings on the vaccination uptake over the recess, which was very helpful to me, and in terms of encouraging a number of people from the BME communities to take up the vaccine. However, this policy is not going to work in Vauxhall. A number of businesses that have been hampered over the last 18 months want to get back. A number of those businesses which are fearful for the looming rent price increases from private commercial tenants. A number of businesses which are fearful about the backlog of business rates that they have to pay. Those same businesses, we are now going to ask them to probably pay to implement this policy. So I want to go back to the issue my colleague from Feltham and Heston raised. What funding will be available to those businesses and when will they receive that funding?
Minister. I'm grateful for the honourable lady's very kind words about the engagement that we have maintained throughout the vaccine deployment programme, and will continue to do so, by the way, as we enter the booster programme, which in some weeks will hopefully break all records that we set in phase 1 of the vaccination programme. I think what is more detrimental to businesses in Vauxhall is having to open and shut again, and that the reason for this policy is to sustain their ability to trade and hopefully trade profitably.
Sorry.
Vaccine take-up amongst the young is essential. What additional incentives can you offer the young people that I work with on a social housing estate in Matlock called Hurst Farm? What additional incentives can you offer them to take up the vaccine?
I'm grateful for the honourable lady's question. Young people have been coming forward in droves to be vaccinated. We have walk-in centres all around the country where people don't even have to book an appointment, and there's been many different ideas for incentivization of young people. The greatest incentive, I hope, is to protect themselves, their families and their community, but also to enjoy the freedoms that come with double vaccination.
Can I just say, I won't be giving any incentives. So when you say you, it was mean to me, so I definitely don't want to do that. John Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And as the Minister has already indicated, many countries are already introducing checks in hospitality and entertainment venues. And large numbers of our own citizens are visiting them on holiday, showing vaccine passes like these issued free by Her Majesty's government. They've already undergone checks at airports. I've been arguing since February for the introduction of vaccine passes in order to save venues and jobs. So to ensure that they can stay open, will he now cut through the hysteria and get on with it?
Yes.
Jason McCarthy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On Sunday, I joined dozens of volunteers for a thank you event with Medicare Pharmacy for the 58,000 jabs that they've delivered to local people this year. What more, though, can the Minister do to encourage, and I use the word encourage, those that have still yet to have their jab to come forward and do so?
Minister.
I'm grateful for my honourable friend's work. He has been a champion of the vaccination programme, and I'm grateful to Medicare Pharmacy. But we continue to have pop-ups at universities and, of course, the walk-in centres around the country, and some incentives to offer young people to get vaccinated. And we continue to redouble our efforts, both keeping the vaccine evergreen for those who haven't yet had their first dose.
Sarah Oldney.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I spoke to a constituent last week. She's a widow with 4 children. She's been working for the NHS on the front line throughout the pandemic. One of her children has a range of very, very complex needs, which can only be met by full-time residential care. And there's only one setting in the entire country which can meet his particular needs. Now, she has been told that they cannot take him because of a shortage of care staff. And they've told her that the particular difficulty in recruiting at the moment is the requirement for care staff to have had 2 jabs. Now, as the member for Forest of Dean, who's no longer in his place, has highlighted, the vaccine does not prevent infection or spread of COVID. So I want to ask the Minister why, given the crisis in recruitment of care staff, do we still have this requirement for 2 jabs when it's not effective and it's depriving vulnerable people from the care they need?
Thank you very much. She will forgive me, but I wish just to really reiterate what she said was inaccurate in the sense that the vaccines don't prevent infections. 60% of people who are double vaccinated will not be infected and therefore cannot spread the virus. It is 40% that can. So it's an important measure. We have a duty of care to those most vulnerable in care homes so that the staff are double jabbed and until the 11th of November to do that.
Simon Job.
Make no mistake, vaccine passports will create a 2-tier society, with the hospitality industry having to police an unethical policy that will hammer their recovery. Given the government's own words that we need to live with this virus, will my honourable friend confirm how long vaccine passports will be in place if passed by this House?
Minister.
I'm grateful for my honourable friend's words. We will set out in detail, in due course, exactly how the vaccine pass will work for domestic use, for example, in nightclubs.
Jim Shannon.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I thank the Minister as well for all the hard work he does do and the very difficult questions that he's answering. Can I ask him this? I've seen that each region of the United Kingdom, Great Britain and Northern Ireland has a different system, different versions, and it confuses people whenever you read it or hear it in the national news in relation to offering the vaccine passport. So can I ask the Minister this question? What discussions has taken place with regional administrations on this issue, and are there any plans to standardise each region to have a one-size-fits-all UK strategy that people can understand and that they can follow?
I'm grateful for Member Stranker's question, an excellent question. We coordinate, and I'm very proud, as are the ministers from the devolved administrations, of the work we've done collectively on the vaccination programme, and that we'll continue to do for the booster programme. But as you heard earlier, this is a devolved matter, but we try and coordinate wherever possible and do the right thing together.
John, are you stuck though? Jacob Young.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I congratulate the Minister and all those involved in the vaccination rollout on 4/5 of over 16-year-olds now double vaccinated. This government has worked night and day to ensure we have the testing capacity to test over 1 million people a day and many more millions with lateral flow tests as well. Surely a nightclub full of people who have tested negative is safer than a nightclub full of people double vaccinated.
I'm grateful for my honourable friend's question and his championing of the vaccination programme. He raises an important point. One of the issues around lateral flow tests is the risk, obviously, of people fraudulently inputting their test result, but also it is for a single excursion, whereas double vaccinated means that you can go and enjoy nightclubs for as many times as you like.
John Morris.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We got there in the end. May I on bended knee implore my right honourable friend to summon all his courage and say no to vaccine passports and to protect our civil liberties. He has done. The minister has been so courageous in the vaccine rollout, and may I thank the minister. But please, please protect our civil liberties and say no to vaccine passports.
I'm grateful for the honourable lady, and all I would say to her when she will pause and I hope reflect on what we will be bringing forward is that it is much better for the nightclub industry to be able to open sustainably whilst we get through the next few months. The winter months are going to be tough, challenging, not just for COVID, but also for flu. And it is a far better option to listen to the clinical advice of the CMOs and implement something which is difficult for me to do. It goes against everything I believe in, but nevertheless, it's the right thing to do.
Greg Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We have a whole summer's worth of data from the Events Research Programme that shows how organisers of events like the British Grand Prix at Silverstone in my constituency had to go to extreme cost to put in the planning and the checking at the gate of vaccine passports. So before this policy is put to a vote in this House, can my honourable friend commit to publishing the data of what the cost to business was of vaccine passport checks through the Events Research Programme, so that we can be fully appraised of the cost of this policy?
Minister.
I'm grateful for my honourable friend's question, an important question, and one that we will absolutely be looking at. Suffice to say, as I mentioned earlier, the Events Research Programme certainly gave us the confidence that people can deal with this relatively easily in the way that a nightclub bouncer can check ID, they can check COVID vaccination status.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Like many across this House, I'm instinctively wary of this idea. Can my right honourable friend give me a clear answer to a specific question? Will right honourable and honourable members receive a vote? And I'm talking, for the avoidance of doubt, about a vote, not scrutiny, on this policy.
I'm grateful for my right honourable friend's question. I have said that there will be parliamentary scrutiny around this, so we'll be coming back and setting out in detail what that looks like.
Christian Wakeford.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm actually flabbergasted, depressed, and actually annoyed that we're actually even discussing this matter. It's absolutely wrong on a fundamental level. So, putting to one side the practical implications of how this is going to be policed, but more importantly, the GDPR implications of bouncers now having medical data at their hand. What are we actually doing in regards to the data? Nightclubs have been open now for over 2 months. Is there any data to actually support this policy? Because I don't think there is.
Minister.
I'm grateful for my honourable friend's question. The very strong advice from the CMOs, as we've heard from our colleagues in Scotland as well, is that this will be an important mitigating measure. It is something that we don't do lightly, and I completely understand his sentiment and his emotion on this. In terms of the data presented, it will be limited simply to the vaccine status and the name of the individual, and you can have it either, obviously, if you have a smartphone, or if you don't, then it will be physical or by email.
Point of order, Chris Brown.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. You will know that last week the Foreign Secretary told the Foreign Affairs Select Committee that he will be making sure that all MPs had direct responses to all the emails that we'd sent to the Foreign Secretary, the Home Secretary, and the Defence Secretary about Afghans and those of friends and relatives of our constituents who have been caught in the situation in Afghanistan. You will know, because you were in the chair, that the Prime Minister repeated this on Monday. He said that we would all have responses by the end of the day, and the Foreign Secretary then repeated that commitment later on in the day. Unfortunately, this just hasn't happened. Insofar as there has been any response at all from government, it is a single email from a junior minister in the Foreign Office which says that we can go and look at a website. I know that you have said repeatedly that ministers have to give proper, substantive answers. And I just hope that you, Mr. Speaker, might be able to speak to government ministers, because so many of our caseworkers across the House are in tears every day because they're having so many cases that are brought to them. I mentioned on Monday the 3 people out of the 143 that I've raised, one of whom's been shot, one of whom's been raped, and one of whom's been tortured. We're all facing these things. I wonder whether there's anything you can do in your powers to make sure that we get proper answers on these. We can't just abandon these people.
Is it related direct to that? Okay, I'll take them to you.
Very much, Mr. Speaker. Very unusually, I completely concur with the honourable gentleman from the other benches. It is really unfair on our staff, let alone our constituents, that we can't give them. This is the first time since I've been in the House, I've not been able to give them the sort of answers that I would expect a minister to give. I've been a minister myself in many different departments, Mr. Speaker, and I know this is difficult for the department, but it is fundamentally also difficult for the families and loved ones and our staff that can't give them the truth.
Jim Shannon, is it the same one?
Same point of order. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I just reiterate and support the 2 honourable gentlemen who have spoken? Last week, I had, as others have had, a constituency have contacted us on behalf of people who they've served with in Afghanistan. Some of those people that the honourable gentleman referred to, there was gun attacks in their houses last week. We sent urgent, absolutely urgent. I sent 3 emails of hand-delivered letters this week. I don't want to embarrass anybody. It's not about that, Mr. Speaker. It's about getting the answers. And can I just say that I would really, really appreciate, as others would, to have the immediate, urgent answers to those issues, because for them, it's a case of life or death. It's really important. And let's see if we can get the answers from the ministers. Thank you.
Can I absolutely say it's quite right for members to raise it? It's very important. The fact is, obligations were made by the government to actually deal with the issues, and they will respond accordingly. MPs have a duty to carry out on behalf of constituents cases that are brought to them. What I would say is, we might have been discussing if the opposition they aren't being pulled, but in the fact that it has been pulled, let me just say to the government front bench, it's not acceptable to make pledges that aren't carried out. And in fact, if this continues, it might be that we need a UQ to actually discuss the issue of why we aren't getting the responses through. And this isn't from one side, this is from both sides of the House. Ministers should reply to MPs. They are accountable to this House, and I expect ministers to reply accordingly to MPs. Right, no further to that point. We're now going to come to the 10-minute rule bill. Sorry, presentation of bill first, I believe. Yeah, James, right.
Social Security uprating of benefits bill.
Second reading what day?
Tomorrow.
Tomorrow. Right. We're now going to come to the 10-minute rule bill. I hope your mum's ready, Jonathan. Jonathan Gillis.